Okay, everybody, welcome to another Prog Report podcast. It has been almost a year to the day since we did our Ultimate 80s podcast, and which is amazing. So we're here to do the Ultimate 90s Prog album with the whole cast of characters. So joining me is Dan Levy.
Hey, everyone.
Emmy Award-winning.
Emmy Award-winning Dan Levy. I'm sorry about that. Jeff Bailie.
Of course,
Victor Giol.
Hi, everybody.
And both Kyles, Kyle Fagala and Kyle Graves.
What's happening? I'm glad to see Geoff is alive. Jeff. I was worried about you.
Yes, for anybody worried that Geoff was dead after the last podcast, he's very much still
rumors
here.
of my death have been greatly exaggerated.
Actually, considering you're in that room, I don't know. Maybe you aren't alive.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Maybe this was
Wow.
recorded before.
Alive
the last
again.
one. So what we are going to do here is similar to what we've done in the past. We're each going to end up picking 3 songs in sequential order here, and no repeats, and really no rules. So we'll just see how this goes. Obviously, stuff from the 90s. I think you guys can expect to see some of the things that you might expect we would do. And of course, I'm sure there'll be some surprises that we're not expecting. Anyway, just a quick word to check out our latest podcast, the one we did with Mike Portnoy and the Neil Morse Band and Neil Morse solo songs is up now, and that's great. And we also have a few other Ultimate albums that we've done recently with Pink Floyd and Rush and some other stuff. So make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our podcast networks and catch up on anything you've missed. And all right, so there we go. So we're going to kick off with, actually, Kyle Graves has not been on one of these. So we're going to give him the honors of the very first pick in this 90s album. So let's see where he goes.
All right. Well, I'm honored. Thanks, man. So anybody listening to this podcast, including all 6 of us, there's one band that we all know that represents 90s Prog. And let's just get it out of the way. Let's say it all together. 3, 2, 1.
Dream
Theater.
Warning. Jeff and I said the same
I was
thing.
going to go Radiohead, but I thought I'd play along correctly.
You guys are my best friends. Yeah, obviously, we cannot overstate the importance of Dream Theater, especially in the 90s when you're talking about Prog. They've influenced countless fans, but musicians as well. Tons of new bands would obviously cite them as an influence. So how do you possibly pick one or two songs when you're talking about the Ultimate 90s from Dream Theater? They came out with Images and Words, the blueprint for the 90s. They had Awake. They had the greatest concept album of all time, Scenes from a Memory. And of course, right in the dead center of the 90s, 1995, this is going to make a couple of you guys happy, A Change of Seasons. That's my number 1 pick. It's nearly a perfect composition. It was 23 minutes long, which certainly at the time was pretty unheard of for a prog metal band. Fates Warning had done it in '88, but really, there were long songs. There were lots of 10 and 12 and 15-minute songs, but to hit a 23-minute song was kind of this mythical thing. And everybody listening to this probably knows about it. It's kind of about the seasons of life, and it's just so well done. It's well executed. The performances are amazing. The lyrics are amazing. Musically, everything is just on point. So if I had to pick, and you guys are making me pick, a lead-off track for the Ultimate 90s, it's got to be A Change of Seasons.
Nicely done.
Podcast done. Podcast done.
Check.
All
So I
right,
appreciate being able to go first and pick that song.
we may
it's awesome.
continue with the podcast. Otherwise, we might have
As an
had to
actual
start over.
album, it's got a very, very good intro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the whole thing, but
I don't think there's a lot more we can add, right? I think we're good with that. No, I don't think anybody has any arguments there.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
one of my favorite songs ever. We'll be talking about another one of them very soon. But yeah,
Right.
that's
And,
a great
yeah.
song.
I mean, listen, at the time, I don't recall having ever heard anything like it. It was mind blowing to all of us that heard that song, and it left a big impression for sure. So
Yeah.
And
I
Carpe
would just
Diem.
say that it's the song that when people ask what is my favorite song of all time, that's what I say, which says a lot. So
Not a bad choice. Not a bad choice.
yeah. Okay, so let's move on to Mr. Jeff Bailie.
okay. Well, I
I've been
said
kicking.
I said to the guys in advance. This was actually quite easy for me because I'm fairly sure that there's a number of bands that they won't even go near. And we move from a song that is known as ACOS by the fans to an album where the fans of this band refer to the album as AOS, and it is the album Afraid of Sunlight by Marillion. 1995 follow-up to their concept album Brave, and influenced by lots of things, that whole album at the time. Not so much a hard concept album, but sort of influenced by the running theme of kind of the Raging Bull theme of people not coping with fame, and I suppose influenced a lot by probably one of the iconic figures of the 90s, Kurt Cobain, who had taken his own life about a year before. And the track I'm going to pick from that album is a track called King. I don't even know how many of the guys, I know some of the guys here would be familiar with it, but it's kind of a reflection on the James Dean, Elvis, Kurt Cobain, King of Pop type world where someone reaches the pinnacle but actually finds that getting there is empty. And sadly that story is something that we associate with the 1990s. It's brilliantly and sensitively executed in a dynamic track with a fantastic ending, a credible vocal performance by Steve Hogarth. And so, yeah, something from that album had to be in here for me, and I think that's the one.
So I for sure expected Marillion from you. I thought you'd go Brave. So were you... Was that a consideration to go for? Because that's sort of considered the album, the quintessential 90s album for them, isn't it?
I think the thing about Brave is that for me, it's hard to pick bits out of it because it is the kind of concept-y narrative thing. Whereas I think King, with the Afraid of Sunlight being a more standalone, alone songs type album. And that's probably my favorite Marillion song, at least this week. It's my favorite Marillion song.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Great. We got Marillion very early out of the way, so
I'm upset I don't get to pick Marillion on this podcast. And so
you can go and listen to the song afterwards, Cal, and hear what I'm talking about.
Great. So that leaves me in a great position to pick possibly one of my all-time favorite bands, if not my favorite band, which is
Bee Gees.
Not Nirvana. Spock's
Def
Beard.
Leppard.
Spock's Beard, and I'm gonna go with the very first song, "The Light."
Yeah.
And
how can you not?
The album that started it all, and I actually, we've talked about it a million times on this podcast in different forums. I mean, it's not the first album or song that I heard, but in going back real quick after discovering the band. Listen to this album, and it just it's amazing and broke ground in every which way, and channeling stuff from the classic era of Genesis and Yes and everything, and flipping it on its head and bringing it in a real modern way that was really cool and interesting and different. And to this day, I mean, those first 6 albums with Neil are just perfection for me, but I got to go with The Light. The only annoying thing is that I didn't discover it until the 90s were almost over. But so it still counts. It came out around 95. And so Spock's Beard, The Light, which I think, again, probably uniformly okay with everybody here.
Yep.
A song that I knew would end up in the album without me picking it, so that gave me great liberty to choose other things. Interestingly, I've seen Neil lots of times. Apart from Snow, I've never actually seen him with Spock's Beard, and so I've never heard that song performed live by Neil. Fun fact. Whereas I guess most of you probably have through Morsefest or Cruise.
Well,
etc.
The greatest part for people like myself that hadn't seen Spock's with Neil, and that's your favorite band and all of that on the Progressive Initiative Sea Cruise, watching him do The Light with the rest of the band was was the peak moment of the.
So
of the whole
not
cruise.
only we got to watch that one live, but we got to watch it twice in 1 year. Right.
True.
So, all right. So we're flying here. We're doing good. Let's see who's next. All right, Dan, what you got?
Okay. So the first pick was Dream Theater. The second one was Marillion. The third one was Spock's Beard. So we got 3 out of 4 transatlantic, and we got the fourth one right now. We're going Stardust We Are.
Nice.
Yeah. So I got my CDs here in the 90s. I think it's the decade of the CDs, and it's also my decade. And I think one of the, also with me was born the Flower Kings. Were born.
I was going to say, this is because you were on the 70s and 80s podcast despite not having been born.
I wasn't on the 80s one,
That's right.
but yeah, I was on the 70s. Very. But yeah,
Jeff,
I'm thinking Stardust We Are.
Jeff, there was no Prague in the 40s. Sorry,
You know
we
what?
can't do anything of.
Oh,
I was listening to that today, actually. That song's just so awesome.
Yeah, I think it's probably my favorite by them. And there are a lot of good picks from Flower Kings in the 90s, but this song has like the best themes, and it's such an emotional track. It's really a journey, like all of their epics. But I think if I was to pick one moment from it, it would be like the middle piano solo section, which is like one of the most beautiful things ever. And in general, it's just one of those like very uplifting songs that makes you feel good. A classic for sure. And if we're picking one from the 90s, I thought about picking Humanissimo, the big one from Roie solo, the Flower King. But I think this one fits better for the ultimate album. So I'm going with it.
No, that's the one I would have picked. I mean, that song's amazing. And you know what's interesting? There's parts in there that totally sound like Transatlantic. And if you were listening to Transatlantic at the time when it first came out, and you're like, some of it sounds unfamiliar, it was from the Flower Kings. Like, it's right from there. You can hear it.
Yeah, if you're just putting a machine, Flower Kings and Spock's Beard, and fuse them, you'll get Transatlantic.
Yeah.
And that part of the DNA is very apparent with this song and album and everything they wrote about around that time.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, this is actually going really well so far. All right.
No
Vic.
one's fallen out yet.
No, let's go, Vic.
Well, it's kind of being the metal guy of the
You
group.
got a big Pain of Salvation now. It's the fifth. Remember.
Well, technically,
another way to go. that you could pick
or
a
I could go with Enchant if
Right,
I was
gonna
gonna
say.
follow that.
Yeah.
But no, I'm actually going out of the box, as you would say. I think one of the significant things, and we were talking about this earlier, is a lot of us were metal fans before we really got into prog. Dream Theater brought in, sorry, Jeff. Dream Theater brought in the the metal with prog, and but there was still a way to get heavier. And so the next band that I'm picking, they just a lot of musicians look to this band because they're just so insanely crazy in everything they do. They're the godfathers of the gent subgenre within prog, and of course I'm talking about Meshuggah.
wow.
And I am picking a song out of their 1995 album Destroy, Erase, Improve. The song is Future Breed Machine. It's the first song on the album, and it is even then, with how heavy they were and just all the polyrhythms and just all the down tuning of the guitars, that really you can hear the influence that those guys had in a lot of the bands that came in the 2000s and up to now. And it's to keep the variety, which I love about prog, is that you got somebody like Marillion or the Flower Kings, and you got Meshuggah with a track in here. So that's who I picked for my first one, and prog metal and gent is now represented.
Nice.
Oh,
Is that a ballad?
for them, yeah, there's no
Nice little love song. Yeah.
No, that's it.
So-
I mean, solid pick
Yeah.
there. What was always funny for me about the name and how you say it, how I guess maybe they pronounce it Meshuggah, but in actual Hebrew, maybe Dan knows this, but Meshuggah
Meshuggah.
means crazy.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's an
okay.
actual word. And I always thought, well, that's a great name for a metal band. It works perfectly.
So guys from Sweden named their band. I mean, is it? I guess the Hebrew spelled differently is just phonetically sounds like.
Yeah, I
Meshuggah.
mean, you're using a different script or whatever if it's in Hebrew, but if you were going to write it in English, that's kind of how it would look. I mean, it's pretty much
Even with the H at the end.
Yeah.
So I'll give a quick shout out to Thomas Hawk, the drummer. I think I ended up picking him, or maybe he was like an honorable mention when we did the best drummers, and I had that middle era. And you talked to drummers actually on Drumeo this past week. They had a thing on someone breaking down one of his classic drum parts, and he has had a huge influence on that genre, on the gent genre in general, but doing this type of beat on his feet. But yeah, good pick. I like that, Vic.
Yeah.
It's, it was, I was going to pick something from that album or from their other album from the 90s, Chaos Fear. Chaos Fear, if you want to hear some insane polyrhythms that when you listen to it, it is so offbeat that it is tense because you can't find that backbeat because they're just all over the place. So that's I love that album, but I think for a representation of their influence and what they do, that's why I went with that song.
Yeah. But
I think that's super cool because it's not Dream Theater, it's not Queensryche, it's not Fates Warning. You definitely picked that from over here, but I think it's a perfect, you got to have a good mix because that's what prog is. And throughout the 90s, that's when prog really kind of exploded from the lighter side to the super heavy side. And Meshuggah is about as heavy as you can get.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Right on.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Kyle, you're up.
All right. So I'm going to pick something. I'm glad it's still here. I was worried that Vic was going to pick this. I got to get one of these legacy picks and bands that I feel like someone else is going to take. So I'm going to pick a band with a song, the definition of which is a fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. And I think it's fun to pick songs that I really like. And this is one that I really like, but it's also good to pick songs that I think represent a significant change in the genre or a significant moment as it pertains to prog in general. So this is going to be Paradigm Shift by Liquid Tension Experiment.
Nice.
So as a little, snot-nosed kid that was into Metallica, and then from Metallica somehow found Dream Theater, and then immediately after hearing Dream Theater got into Liquid Tension, I remember putting this CD on, and of course it just explodes. And so at the time, that was like the apex of drumming. Like that was as good as drumming could ever be. And then Mike Portnoy had a drum technique video that I watched, I don't know, 100 times or something. And he breaks down the science of this and the kind of the math of this. And there is a certain math, obviously, to progressive rock and certainly math rock and all these sorts of subgenres of prog. But the way that Liquid Tension does kind of math rock, it's still cool and it still has a groove to it. And I think that's why I really appreciate Mike Portnoy's drumming is that even though it's complicated and it's technical, it still has kind of at its base like 60s, 70s, 80s classic rock, and it has a vibe and it has a groove. And I think that's why, for me, he's one of my favorite drummers because it's the same reason I like Ringo and the same reason I like John Bonham. It's these drummers that the way they play, it moves you, let's say. And so Liquid Tension is just sort of the next step. And obviously from Liquid Tension came the next couple decades of Dream Theater as well. So it's an important song. I love the song and my favorite song on that first album.
I remember the shock of hearing the song for the first time. Just, you knew who the musicians were, but when you just popped it in and immediately you get that wall of and you're just, enjoying it and going for a roller coaster ride that went from 0 to 60 in half a second. And that was, and that's where it started. And you listen to the rest of their stuff, and that was great. Love the pick.
Yeah.
That's one of the bands that is on my list.
I knew it.
Can't argue with that one. Nice shot.
Were you considering maybe When the Water Breaks or one of the other songs? I was wondering about which way to go there.
I have 2 songs for Liquid Tension, and those are the 2. But for me, you could pick either one. They're both great. I think those are the 2, I guess. And there's a couple others that float around in there. But for me, Paradigm Shift being the first song, and just, you have certain musical memories.
Makes sense as a choice. Yeah.
Whenever you're playing like crazy prog metal stuff for your friends, exactly. You put on Paradigm Shift or Acid Rain, one of those, and it's just like, check this out, and their heads are ripped off. So that's
Geoff,
perfect choice.
Cal, you're a Mike Portnoy fan?
Yeah. Here and there.
Cool. Yeah,
I mean, he's my connection point to prog. He's the reason I'm sitting here. as it were.
Same.
So yeah.
Sitting where? Did he
Well,
drive
I'm
you
here
to-
in my.
Did
Well-
he drive you to work?
The next podcast, he might be doing it behind one of Mike's drum sets, which you have to.
Oh,
do
that'd
at
be
some point.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
All
It's
right,
just
so
a-
so
it's just
round
a virtual
one.
background.
Round one to recap.
Yeah.
To recap, we went Dream Theater, Change of Seasons, Marillion King, Spock's Beard Delight, Flower King, Stardust We Are, Meshuggah, Future Breathe Machine, and Liquid Tension Experiment, Paradigm Shift. So that's a solid first round. Now things get tricky. Now let's see what happens because it might go all over the place. So KG, back to you.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. So there's a great band out of very rural Pennsylvania. And how many of you guys, just you guys on here, how many of you guys are familiar with the band Echoland?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wasn't, we go to...
They make an appearance in my book, which is
Indeed.
available on
That's a-
progreport.com as an ebook
Your
now.
book?
Lots of great
How everyone has
information.
one on hand.
We
Yeah.
should
This
do one of those
podcast.
things, where somebody goes.
We all hold it up. Yeah, Echoland came out in I think 91 was their first release, and by the mid 90s they'd put out a couple records that were just brilliant. And for all the like big trains and Riversides and sort of that level of prog bands, I just don't feel like Echoland ever got that level of respect. They're still around. It's still the same five guys. It's very American prog. They kind of took what Gentle Giant did in the 70s and really made that their thing with all the crazy vocal stuff going on, the classical instrumentation. And so my song pick, the band is amazing. The song pick is the title track to As the World, which came out in 95. I was working at Sony Music at the time, and a friend of mine said, hey, we just signed this band called Echoland, a prog band. And I got an advance of it. I was just like, where have these guys been? Where has this type of music been? Because again, in 95, prog was just starting to kind of become a thing and really explode. But to me, they were the epitome of the alternative to the alternative. So for some of you younger guys, in the 90s, alternative and grunge was like the thing. And that was the flavor of the week. You had Smashing Pumpkins, you had Oasis, you had all that kind of stuff, Pearl Jam. And they were all dubbed alternative music. But then you had a band like Echoland come out and go, this is so far from what's on the radio right now. Oh my gosh, just blew your mind. So I made it my goal when I was at Sony to try to make this, break this band. But unfortunately, out of the entire company, it was me and one other guy, Michael Kaplan, who was the guy that signed them to the label, who's also a Morse Fest attendee. But unfortunately, they just never really broke. I can't tell you how many hours I spent trying to promote and market this band. But I'll read you and why I chose the title track to As the World. These are some of the lyrics. I could have picked probably any song from that record, but one of the verses says, it's too easy to be in with a hairstyle. It's too easy to go with the flow. It's hard to see through a haze of popularity, to shake your head as the world just nods away. And it's all about, not conforming, not going in with a trend or, what's popular in music right now. And that's why we love prog, right, guys? I mean, that's what the whole genre is about. So
Totally.
I think we got to give Echoland some props when you're talking about an ultimate 90s compilation. Like I said, the band's still around. They're still doing albums. They still tour occasionally. But As the World title track, that's awesome, essential 90s prog to me.
Good.
Great pick.
Hey.
I mean, that is a really great album. To be one of the only bands in this kind of genre at that time to get discovered by a major label and get that opportunity is sort of amazing that they're the band that happened with.
And it's such a great record. It was one of those records where every song, to me anyway, was a classic. And I thought, this is it. This is going to break these guys. And now, a couple decades later, they're still sort of a fringe prog band, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Great band.
Also, Brett Krull, the singer, he did sign with Sony again with another guy, JP, I forget his name,
Right.
called Rise Twain, and
Right.
they had an album out last year, which is a little bit more folksy kind of stuff,
Yep.
but actually
cool
still
stuff.
really cool.
Yep.
So check that out. Okay, Geoff, your second pick.
Well, now, okay, my second pick is going to feature. Let me see. Yeah, well, at least one musician who already has featured on our podcast today. Same year as my last one, 1995, which was when King Crimson came back. And King Crimson came back in 1995 as a double trio, which was Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew on guitars, Tony Levin from Liquid Tension Experiment and lots of other things, and Tony Levin and Trey Gunn on bass type guitars, and Bill Bruford and Pat Mastelotto on drums and various battery. And the track I'm going to go for, I mean, this is a I don't know if you guys know the album Thrack, but it's a pretty heavy album in places, with some lightness on sort of the more Adrian Belew poppy side. But the track Vroom, which is the one that kicks it off, sort of digs into the Red sort of era of King Crimson, and probably the stuff that, I mean, the joke is I don't like the heavier stuff, but actually Red by King Crimson and some of those things probably influenced an awful lot of kind of what came after it. And this was, I suppose, that lineup returning to that kind of sound. It's a very clever arrangement with lots of dynamics. It's got great time signature, interplay, and there's later on in the album there's a track called Vroom Vroom, which repeats some of the themes from it, but a really cool instrumental, features for all of the instrumentalists on it, and just really one of my favorite King Crimson tracks. So Vroom from Thrack.
Wasn't that one of the albums on Progust last year?
It was.
It was.
Yeah, so I remember listening to it a lot. I love that album.
It's a great album. Actually, one of the King Crimson albums that I actually do enjoy. I like Dinosaur. That's really cool. Kind of Adrian Belew, weird song. Very cool song. Cool. Geoff, you're filling the spot of the Marillion King Crimson guy perfectly today.
Yeah, well, because I knew nobody else would pick them.
Yeah, but respect. That's a great album. M song.
Anyway, let's move on to the next Dream Theater related track.
Good point.
Geoff is always there when you need him.
I got a few different ways to go, and it's tough. It gets real tricky. But I'm gonna go very late 90s, 99. I had not yet discovered this band, but I'm gonna go Porcupine Tree from the Stupid Dream album, which is sort of the first album of full long, like actual songs, lyrics in every song. I think that's like 12 songs, and it's the first real attempt at a real sort of normal record, not kind of weird instrumental stuff and all that kind of stuff that he was doing in the early 90s. Not my favorite Porcupine Tree album, but still an amazing, amazing record. He's really first starting to tap into the sound that would become the stuff you'd hear on Lightbulb Sun and In Absentia and stuff that came later. But I'm going to pick sort of a weird song off that album that I don't think maybe is one they've played live much, or if ever, I'm not even sure. It's on towards the later half of the record. It's called A Smart Kid. And love that song. I almost went Stranger by the Minute, but because that's kind of one of my favorite songs by them too. But I think A Smart Kid is more representative of what Porcupine Tree is and what they would sound like. Are you guys familiar with that song? I'm not sure if that's one that, I mean, Geoff, I imagine you would be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just love that. I think it's really cool, and it has that.
That's one of the few songs from that era that kind of sounds like they would do now, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Ahead. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I thought you were probably going to go with something from Signify, but that's a great pick.
Yeah, I thought about that. I feel like I've mentioned Signify in other podcasts for some reason. I thought we haven't really talked about this album much, but this has always been one of my favorite songs by them. That's very kind of under the radar there. So, yeah, Smart Kid.
Brilliant album, and I mean, Signify was the first album that I heard at the time it came out, and that was mostly actually through kind of connecting to it through Marillion stuff. But that album was very different, and even less, the track that opens it up, it was really is one of my favorite Porcupine Tree songs. But again, the whole even less from Lightbulb Sun.
Yeah, the first song.
Yeah, that whole album has fantastic moments.
Yeah, I mean,
I nearly put it on the list, and then I thought Roie will probably pick it. So, not that particular track.
But Lightbulb Sun is 2000, right?
Lightbulb Sun is the one that came after. Yeah. No, even less. He meant Stupid Dream. Lightbulb's. Even less is on Stupid Dream. It's the first song on that.
Sorry.
Yeah, but there's a lot of great stuff on there. Tinto Brass and Piano Lessons is really weird.
Lessons,
It's what's it called? Baby Dream in Cellophane, which is another completely weird song title, but a great song. All right, so good. We got Porcupine Tree out of the way. Dan, you're up.
Oh, it's me already. All right. So let's go back to the heavy side. My next pick's gonna be Opeth, Still Life. Yeah, so we gotta sneak this one in. I think this album is criminally overlooked. It's a top 3 Opeth album for me.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yeah, and that's I know that's a hot take and unpopular opinion, but to me, I go Ghost Reveries, Pale Communion, and this one. And this album is a riff machine. You have so many a big variety of riffs, and they're powerful, and the guitar duets. It's if you want to go like, hey, I want to listen to the craziest Michael Wickerfeld riffs, you just go for Still Life, because it's just quality stuff. And I know that's different from a lot of the other picks. It's probably closer to Vic's Meshuggah pick. But I'm going to go with the second lightest song in the album, which is Face of Melinda. There were a couple ways for me to go with this one. My personal favorite would be to go with The More, or probably White Cluster, one of those longer songs, more epic, that kind of represent Opeth very well. But I think Face of Melinda does that too, because it starts off very light and it's more on the ballady side. And then halfway through, it becomes another whole different song, but the very strong riff, a very strong vocal melodies and all that. And the ending is just fantastic with the fade out. So this is a very, I know a lot of people don't like Opeth because of death metal vocals. And I'm one of those people that don't really love death metal vocals. But Opeth is the rare exception to the rule for me. But Face of Melinda is a song that has none. It's just straight up clean vocals. So I think everyone should listen to that one and try if you don't know. It's one of their classic songs. They played it a lot live, and it's a very popular, great, beautiful track.
Dan, that's a brilliant pick.
Yeah.
Because overall that album, I would not have, I really didn't even consider it for this list, but specifically that song, I think that's great, because that you're talking about, if you look way ahead, that's where the roots were already taking place back then. And listen, for a metal guy, that album and the riffs and the speed and it's so nice job, man.
It's very aggressive as a whole.
If I'm in an Opeth mood, that's a go-to for sure. That's a great pick, man.
Yeah, good.
Nice. Proud. Yeah, a few of us know that song and that album. Nice.
I know that song. I know that song. That's good.
That's how you right.
Yes. Oh man,
I get that reference.
And when I'm in an Opeth mood, I'm never in an Opeth mood.
You unbutton the top button on your shirt.
Yeah.
He doesn't wear an undershirt. He doesn't wear an undershirt when he's in an Opeth mood.
Take him directly to the ER if he's in an Opeth mood. Something's wrong.
He's tried. I've witnessed him trying to be in an Opeth mood.
I've got CDs here.
Yeah.
And you listen to them when?
When Dan asked.
No, yeah, I vividly remember asking him to listen to Harlequin Forest. And I was like, dude, this is one of the best songs ever made. You gotta love it. It's amazing. Look at the drums. And Jeff's like, it doesn't do much for me. Typical Jeff fashion.
All right,
I like
Vic.
what I like.
Yep.
What's your next pick?
Well, I'm enjoying all the new bands that have gone on this second round, and I'm going to follow suit with a band that does not have really any ties to anything that we've spoken about so far. This is a band that you can almost argue that they're their own category. When they first started coming out with their stuff, which was in the early 90s, they weren't grunge. They were heavy, but they weren't Pantera. They really didn't have, much of, as far as, really fast stuff, but they were just dark and heavy. I'm talking about Tool. I'm not so sure if at the time any of us would have labeled them as prog, but as time has gone on, just they've been so far ahead and so different in everything that they do. They have 2 albums in the 90s that I just kept on going back and forth. I was tempted to go with their first single, which was, was Sober from Undertow, but that would just not be proggy enough. And since this is this proggy, I'm actually, and confession, because I always read it and I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Anima?
I think Enema, right?
Enema?
How do we?
I've heard it both ways, man. I don't know what the final consensus is.
Well, anyways, a band that has prison sex as a title for a song, so Enema kind of fits in.
I think it's Enema. Yeah.
Okay, so from Enema, I picked their opening song, Stink Fist. It's just, it's got tension. It's
a good
heavy.
description of a prog concert. Stink Fest.
As Stink Fists are apt to do.
Jeff Bailie is rolling over in his grave.
It's got tension.
Well,
we need to do. I need one of those virtual effects that blows Jeff up.
Yeah.
Jeff is turning the color of the curtain behind him right now.
Yeah.
Dan, you got to help me do that. I'm serious. We have to do that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Don't worry.
All right.
It will happen.
And then can he sit there for the rest of the selection with no head?
Just beheaded. Yeah.
Stinkfest.
But can I raise a practical question at this point, to quote the great Derek Smalls? Sorry, Vic, I don't want to interrupt you, but I mean, at the sorry, Kyle, probably someone who might be, KG might be closer to this. I mean, at the time, were those bands considered to be prog? And I'm not making the argument of what is and what isn't prog, but my memory of the 90s wouldn't be Meshuggah, Tool, Opeth. I mean, they were like, death metal.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I never considered Tool prog. To me, they were a metal grunge band. If I can.
Yeah, that's a good description, because they were in that era, during.
None of my friends liked Tool, and we all liked Dream Theater and Queensryche and Fates Warning. None of us liked Tool. Everyone that I knew that liked Tool liked Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all that. So that was that camp for me. I think because of the technical playing and because they're such good musicians, they get the prog people like them. That's sort of
they were prog adjacent in my mind, but just Danny Carey's drumming alone made them prog.
All of them.
Wow, how's he coming up?
It's crazy good. So
it's stellar, yeah. But at the time, I wouldn't have considered him prog. But looking back, I go, oh yeah, there's quite a bit of proggy stuff going on.
He was playing double kick riffs, so that's why I wasn't a fan of the grunge stuff, but I was a fan, and I am a fan of Tool, because of just. They were so different, and they were so heavy, and they were so technical. And then they were dark, and they were just different. So that's.
I mean, I'll say Tool is absolutely prog. I mean, by any, if they were less popular, they'd be more likely to be called prog, I feel like. So yeah, I think they're it's the same argument that's used against Pink Floyd. Well, they're a classic rock band. Well, they're only classic rock because they're hugely famous. They're definitely a prog band.
It's the mainstream argument.
Sorry,
I mean, Tool on. Well, I just say this on 46 and 2 would have been my pick from Enema, but Stinkfist is a great song, and I always giggle saying the names of these songs on Enema, Stinkfist. But 46 and 2 has 4/4 and 7/8, and there's sections of like 9/8 and 5/8, and like they're absolutely prog from a technical and a time signature standpoint. Absolutely. And then like lyrically, what they're getting at is right in line with that. But they were on MTV and they had weird stop motion animation videos. And so they kind of caught into the sort of stoner grunge vibe thing, but they're way out there as a band and they're super popular. So I like the pick, but
you could tell there's an influence on a lot of artists, that they just,
absolutely.
They're just a popular choice.
Well, a lot of the more
Drums,
modern,
too.
newer bands are. I mean, you can definitely hear the influence from Tool. So yeah, no, I think. I mean, you're talking about '90s. You gotta. I think the mention of Tool is totally
Yep.
reasonable.
And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that they are or they aren't. I'm just saying at the time, my memory
Yeah.
of those.
No,
bands
I agree.
that
I don't
wouldn't
think
have-
that's wrong.
That wouldn't have been the label. What
Van Gogh wasn't appreciated in his time, so
neither was Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh. What? Just lyrically, what is Stink Fist about?
So we're gonna have an extra episode to break down.
So
Yeah,
Jeff, think who you're asking this to. Somebody that doesn't care what the lyrics
one
are.
line
So
from the lyrics.
no
Finger
clue.
deep,
I don't
thing in
want
the
to know.
borderline.
I don't want to
There's
know.
lyrics.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on then. All right, Kyle, your second pick.
Man, I'm excited. I'm getting to make my picks that I wanted to make.
You're
And
welcome.
so this is great. And I'm going to go with another band that at the time definitely wasn't seen as a prog band. And I don't know that they're still seen as a prog band, but I'm taking this of the mindset of songs. And maybe I didn't have to take it this way, but I like to pick songs from a certain decade that it has turned out, looking back, have had a huge impact on progressive rock. And I think a song that is progressive whether the band intended to write it as a progressive rock song or not. And so a song that I think is quintessential for the 90s decade from that regard is Paranoid Android by Radiohead. So
Okay.
this is 1997. Jeff, is your head exploding again?
My head exploded again.
Yeah. So, I remember listening to this as a kid and loving it. And it had a cool animated video. And I actually loved Karma Police more like as just a standalone song. But go back and listen to Paranoid Android and you'll hear the next 20 years of progressive rock, at least a portion of it, on that track. And so I think in that moment, they talk about how it's like the Sgt. Pepper's for the digital age or whatever you want to say, but they did really find a way to take alternative and pop rock and mix that with electronica and create something new. And so obviously they did it with a song that's got 4 distinct sections that is syncopated in the way that Radiohead is really great at doing. It's got a choir in it. It's cinematic. It's got tempo changes, and it's just 6 minutes. And so to me, it feels like if it were written by a prog band, 1,000% it would be on every list of the greatest, 90s prog rock songs. But it happens to be written by Radiohead, who certainly would hate that we're discussing them right now, which makes me enjoy discussing them. So that's my pick.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Radiohead guy, but I got to watch them a couple of years ago. And for all of the concert, that was the one moment that was like, hey, that's pretty cool.
That
So,
sounds amazing.
yeah.
I'm a big fan of that album. I always, even back when it came out, I started listening to it then at the recommendation of a friend, and I was really impressed. I was really into that album and the Bends before that for a period. It's not a band that I listen to often because I sort of got past that. I don't know. If it's on, I like it. I don't like a lot of the stuff that came after OK Computer, but yeah, totally. That's a great album, and it's just a really cool song and very original. I mean, bands that were popular, that were alternative rock, were not doing stuff that cool when that album came out. They were really stretching, because if you had trouble liking stuff like Smashing Pumpkins and things like that, you could put on this album and go, okay, there's someone trying to do something interesting that's cool, that works. And that's
Wait, I like
that.
Smashing Pumpkins. What are you talking about?
Can we?
They've got some
turn
prog
off his
elements
mic. Turn
too.
off his mic. Can we turn off his mic?
Please, please.
Okay.
Blow him up now.
All right. So second round was it more interesting, right? We had Echo Lynn, As the World, King Crimson Room, Porcupine Tree, Smart Kid, Opeth, Face of Melinda, Tool, Stinkfist, and Radiohead, Paranoid Android. I feel like we went almost alternative with the second round. It was kind of weird. All right.
Well, Jeff insulted us for being Mike Portnoy adjacent picks. So there you go, Jeff.
All right, KG, your third pick.
There's still a third round to go.
And final pick.
True.
Third and final. For
You
me.
better go with this band that
Oh my
otherwise
goodness,
they might not get picked on this
yeah,
thing. So I'm
there's
just telling you.
There, you gotta pick. Come on, Kyle.
Every time
any
no
podcast
fear.
that I'm on, I always mention you because of this band. No pressure.
You're in my heart, my brother. You're in my heart. Fate's Warning.
Yay!
Yeah,
Woo!
there we go.
Is that the thing?
You have to. You have to, man. There's the big three of prog metal, of course, Dream Theater, Queensryche, and Fate's Warning. And the heavier side of prog would absolutely not be there, including Dream Theater, if it wasn't for the origins of Fate's Warning. So you get into the 90s, Parallels was definitely, and still is, was their most commercially successful record. They had, videos on MTV. They had great radio play. Great record. Love it. Can't pick it. Too obvious. The follow-up to that in 94 was Inside Out. Not as successful, but I personally love that record. I would go with probably any song off that record as well. But you have to go, if you're talking about 90s prog and you're talking about just progressive rock in general, you have to go with A Pleasant Shade of Grey, 1997. And the beauty, gentlemen, the beauty of this is I don't have to pick a song.
That's right.
It's one song. It's 54 minutes long.
I called it.
It's
We
glorious.
broke a record with our ultimate
It's-
90s album now.
I would like to say, just of my 3 picks alone, I added them up. Just my 3 picks are 82 minutes worth of music.
They don't fit on one CD.
Yeah, it's a double album already.
But and the thing is, like, obviously long songs are a hallmark of prog and everything. I wasn't like, oh, let me just find the longest songs. Those, just A Change of Seasons and A Pleasant Shade of Grey, are 2 of my favorites. Pleasant Shade of Grey it's almost perfection. It's moody, it's atmospheric, it's heavy, it's really mellow, it's ambient. Jim Matheos wrote the whole track, the mastermind of Fate's Warning. But Ray Alder, the vocals on that record, it's kind of like, for as emotional as Ray's voice is, and if you're a Fates fan, you know what I mean. It's like Ray just took his voice, put it in a wet towel, and just wrung every drop of emotion out of his voice into that record. You had the return of Kevin Moore on keyboards. He left Dream Theater a couple years before to go off and do atmospheric ambient stuff. He came back and played on that record. You had Joey Vera, who was the bass player for Armored Saint, kind of a traditional metal band. He joined Fates at that time and showed that he's a real prog guy. So the combination of all that, and then Mark Zonder's drumming. If you're a drum fan, a prog drum fan at all, it's a master class of progressive rock drumming. Amongst many, many high water points in Mark's drumming, A Pleasant Shade of Grey is amazing. So that has to be included in this era. I guess if you had to pick one section of that 54-minute track, part 11 would be the one, because that just kind of represents the whole record. But awesome song, not album, song. And you guys definitely just need to spend 54 minutes
Kyle
listening
came
to
strong with the podcast choices.
That makes me so happy. That's one of my favorite picks, and I'm so glad you picked all of it. That's great.
all of it.
Yeah.
One song, man.
All right. Yeah, that's
Kyle,
right
Kyle,
there.
we're gonna try to squeeze all your picks onto one mini disc. Okay, so in the honor of the 90s. So
Sweet. Mini disc. Nice reference.
Wow.
Nice. All right. Nice way to kick off round 3. Jeff, where are you going with this one?
Where am I going?
He has no head now, though.
I've got 2 ways to go, and yeah, I mean, I think this has. My other choice is a song that I really, really like, and it's one of my favorites from the 1990s. But I'm not going to include it because I think there's a song that we really need to have in here that we haven't got in here. Possibly, the most commercially successful prog-related song of the 1990s, I would suggest.
Trying to see if I have something that would qualify for that on my list.
Number one in the US mainstream rock chart, number 34 in the UK singles chart, when Cher's Shoop Shoop song was nearing the top of the charts. This was lurking in the 30s. It's a ballad, like the Meshuggah track, sort of a power ballad, so quite 1990s. But it is Queensryche,
Wow.
Silent Lucidity.
Good.
All right.
And,
I'm shocked that's your pick, but I love it.
I'm very shocked.
well,
Dude.
why is that shocking to you?
Well, you've never been like a Queensryche fan that I know.
I totally was a Queen. I totally was a Queensryche fan at the time of Mindcrime and the time of Empire. After that, I sort of tailed off, but I absolutely loved the Empire album. And that, you know, that song was that song was one that had huge profile at the time. Lots of people who would never have heard of Queensryche would have heard of it, and you know, I felt it was a really, really good representation of the band. I think Geoff Tate's vocal on it is just absolutely incredible. Michael Kamen's strings very much echoing you know, Comfortably Numb, and you know, not shying away from it, but you know, just that beautiful nylon you know, nylon string guitar intro right through to the guitar solos, fantastic. Scott Rockenfeld, you know, we've talked about drummers, but absolutely, you know, one of the drummers who contributed to a lot of, you know, what we consider to be the kind of the norm in prog nowadays. I just think it's a beautifully produced, a beautiful sounding track from start to finish, and I think it needs to be in here because it's just one of the biggest songs of the decade.
Can I just
very interesting choice?
Stunned silence.
No, amazing choice. Can I just check with Kyle Fagala? Were you gonna go Anybody's Listening with the last track? You said you were gonna. Okay, I thought maybe Geoff might have stolen.
My final pick remains unpicked, and I hope it stays that way. Great pick. I love that song. I mean, who's not gonna love that song? Yeah. So it's almost like, in some sense, it doesn't feel proggy enough, but you're dead right. I mean, they were about as big as prog got in the 90s, and I love it.
You know, it's in Radiohead.
What's interesting at the time is, yeah, I remember people sort of not complaining, but pointing out the fact that, you know, they're talking about Dream, so it's very similar to what Pink Floyd had done. And again, at that time, I forgot who it was that mentioned, you know, Pink Floyd was more of a classic rock band because they were big as opposed to prog. So interesting, Kyle, that you say, you know, it's not the proggiest of songs from a band that's very influential in prog and were prog metal pioneers themselves. But it's
can't win.
But it's kind of like if you're doing a Kansas, you know, podcast top 5, you have to pick Carry On My Wayward Son. So this song fits in here.
No, you don't.
We didn't.
We didn't.
I think the thing about it is, for me though, that you know, it's not prog, and you know, it's not proggy in terms of it's not really, really shreddy, but
complex.
There's so many movements,
the mood of it, and the whole thing. It
you know,
is.
it's not, you know, it's not you know, an Aerosmith or a Cher power ballad. You know, it's got something. It's got a greater depth, and I mean, we're not picking albums, but the Empire album, I think, in terms of its themes, its subject matter, the range of styles, you know, was something that was incredible. I mean, I enjoyed Mindcrime, but Empire just really,
I didn't think of it as prog at the time, but I didn't think of anything as really prog at the time. I wasn't, you know what I mean?
It was just music.
It was just sort of a more substance related kind. I mean, that's not what I'm looking for. It had substance to it, like, whereas the other hair metal stuff
it wasn't
the
Poison.
80s wasn't good anymore. I like a lot of that stuff, but the stuff coming out at 89, 90, 91, it started to really fade, which is why it ended up going away. But
I think in many ways
Queensryche was good.
They were the lyrical stepping stone to Stinkfist. Like,
I think a lot of people think that way. Yeah.
Sure. Now, Geoff, I think that's a great pick, because you kind of just blew my mind, because of the 4 records that Queensryche had in the 90s. I definitely would. I think of all the crazy technical progressive, you know, stuff that they did. Even like they had Promised Land. They had a bunch of good songs on here, and then Now Frontier, much more complex technical stuff. But you blew my mind by picking this song, because like, oh man, he's right. Well, that is a progressive song.
I had Anybody's Listening on my short list because I thought that might be the way to go, but no complaints. But Geoff, I gotta say, there was a Genesis album and Pink Floyd that I thought maybe you might go one of those ways, and you did not. So props.
But you know what? I mean, to me, again, you know, I mean, my other pick was a Yes song, and you know, I like all of those albums, but I think, you know, I don't think they were, you know, genre defining 1990s prog.
I
The
totally forgot
representation
about
of
most
the
of
era.
most
I
of
totally
what we've
did not
talked
have
about
Yes
today.
Talk on my short list, and I should. Now I'm regretting that, but I don't
Well,
think I'm going to pick.
Silent Stream, that was my other choice. Sorry, Endless Stream, the
Endless
big long
Stream,
track
yeah.
from the top album.
That's a good one.
Was my debate.
But you know what? You're right, and that's not defining 90s prog. And so, in the spirit of that, I'm going to go with a band that at the time, honestly, was one of the only other bands similar to Dream Theater and Queensryche that I had discovered at the time in the mid 90s that I got hooked onto. And I'm going to go Enchant and At Death's Door from the Blueprint of the World album. Because, you know what? I was really into them at the time. They were an upstart band. They had nothing going on. Somehow I got a hold of the CD. I was really into them for a while. I still think they're a great band that doesn't get a lot of recognition. And I think they were important in paving the way for a lot of the stuff that came later, and they sort of kept the flame alive there. I mean, you had Dream Theater, Fate's Warning if you liked it a little heavier. Queensryche was sort of fading by then because that was Here and Now Frontier period. There wasn't a lot if you like that kind of music outside of the Magna Carta stuff. And Enchant were actually, I thought, those first two records, I almost went Below Zero because I really liked that first song from Wounded a lot. But I think At Death's Door sort of is the Enchant song with that guitar riff and the whole thing. So, so I'm going to go with them.
It's a great pick. I really like that pick. It's a great band. Underrated in a lot of ways. They kind of get pushed off, but when you listen to their stuff, especially the first two albums, it really set the mark for them. It took a while for me to warm up to their music again when they came up with, was it The Great Divide back in 2014? They had a good comeback with that one. Hoping to get some more, because they started doing the cruise ship again, and was hoping that we would get some new recorded stuff. Maybe they will, but yeah, that's a fun band and great to listen to, and another representative of transatlantic. There you go, Daniel.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
Ted, absolutely kills it on that track. Really, really fantastic vocal performance through that whole album. Really.
Cool. All right, I'm glad they got a shout. And Dan, where are you going with your third pick?
Okay. You guys remember I said I'm picking another one of my favorite songs ever, and that's the one to come right now. I got right here in my hands a Japanese compilation of the best Symphony X songs in the 90s. And I think any of these songs is an appropriate pick, right? But I'm going with the epic, The Divine Wings of Tragedy, from the album The Divine Wings of Tragedy.
I'll allow it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wasn't that
This
in Progress
song
as well? Wasn't that in Progress?
No, it was Twilight in Olympus.
No, we went to a different album.
Yeah, it was Twilight in Olympus.
Yeah.
Which has Through the Looking Glass, which is also one of the greatest songs by them. But still, let's Divine Wings of Tragedy. 19-minute, I think 20-minute song. It starts off with a choir, huge, with some of the vocal themes and different vocals, very mysterious, a very different vibe, dark. And then it starts Michael Rommel, which is one of the greatest guitar players of our generation. He's a very big Star Wars fan. And the beginning of this song is inspired by, I'm not a Star Wars guy, so I forgot the name of the song, but is it the Imperial March, Kyle?
Yes.
Darth Vader, the Darth Vader.
Yeah, I'm half kidding, but anyways, I just wanted to
Nice.
Okay, but it's very much inspired by that, and then it goes into the various themes of the song, and of course, Symphony X has Russell Allen on the vocals, and he's one of the greatest voices in metal and in prog. And yeah, this song is a classic. I think Symphony X usually goes unnoticed by a lot of our crew. To be honest, I am the sole fan here.
You are the Symphony X guy in this group.
Yeah,
for sure.
But I think they deserve as much recognition as a lot of these other bands. They were one of my personal introductions to prog, along with Dream Theater, which we just spoke about and probably will again in just a few minutes. But The Divine Wings of Tragedy is a top 3 song ever for me. It's one of those songs that is epic and defines epic. And that's it. Great solos, great song, great lyrics, the full package.
Expect a phone call from Daniel Gildenlow any minute.
Yeah. Funny thing. I thought about picking a Pain of Salvation song, but I think we should just let it be the 2000s. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Yeah. Solid pick, man. Good.
Symphony X back together again. Yeah. You gonna go see him?
They weren't broken apart, but yeah.
They
well,
they never.
What did you hear? Yeah.
They never broke up, but yeah.
Right.
If they're here, I'll be there.
Has it not been a while since they've done something?
It's been a bit, yeah. But they were.
Yeah, it's been a bit, but
not doing anything.
Kind of, that's kind of their MO. It's one
hiatus, broken
up.
up.
Yeah.
Okay.
They just never justify it. It just takes them a while every time.
Kyle Fagala with the fake news.
All right, Vic, what's your pick?
Could have fooled me. All right, go ahead.
So selfishly, my pick is really going to add to the prestige of this round. I really have enjoyed everything that everybody's picked, but I'm pretty guaranteed to sort of get head scratches when you hear this one. I'm going to follow my heavy theme, and I could feel Geoff's head about to explode.
Again,
I'm going with a band that really has influenced a lot of the progressive metal bands of now. And that is Cynic and their first album, Focus. There's several songs from that album that I could have picked. I just decided to go with their opening track. It's pretty quintessential of their sound, and they incorporate, the keyboard vocal, the voice coder, I think that's what it's called. And, but they do have the growling vocals, but they're a band that will go into some very heavy technical metal, and then suddenly in the snap of a finger, go to a really just clean tone fusion type sound. Something that Opeth would do in the 2000s, something that a lot of the bands between the Buried and Me kind of do the same thing. This is a band that when you talk to the musicians, once again, they are just recognized as the biggest influence. For some reason, in the Berklee College of Music, this band, this specific album was spoken about all the time. And it's something where I just really, enjoyed listening to them and going back and listening to this. Not the best production, early 90s, they really didn't know how to tame, just that heavy sound, but influential and definitely proggy, not at the time considered to be prog. But if you listen to the death metal that was being played before then and what they started bringing in, it was a far more technical, far more musician centered as far as with the theories and just the techniques. And
did you say a song title?
Veil of Maya.
Okay.
I think I said it earlier.
No, I didn't. I didn't know if I heard it. Yeah, that's the song. I mean, it's sort of a out of left field for maybe this group and some people watching, but it is considered super influential in prog metal for sure.
Is that in your book?
And it is in my book. So
all right,
there you go.
There you go.
Then it's official.
It's official.
Vic, the more you talk, man, the more I realize we could have hung out when we were teenagers, because I love all types of prog. I mean, Kansas was the first prog band I got into, but the heavier side definitely speaks to me. But I'm going, man, Vic is really into some heavy stuff, dude.
Yeah.
Listen, when I knew him, he was, when we first met, before we got into doing all the prog stuff, all I knew Vic liking was Nevermore, Iced Earth, Death.
Wow.
I mean, Dream Theater was like the lighter side of what he was listening to.
Fear Factory, Arch Enemy.
Yeah, for sure.
Right on. Well, it's a solid pick.
If I'd hung out with you when I was that age, Vic, I might have heard of Cynic. But no, it's good to find out in 2021.
just button your shirt back up.
What I missed in the 1990s.
So we have one more pick left.
Pens.
Kyle's pick is still
I'm
there,
looking forward to this
apparently.
because the grin on his face is such that lets you know he got his pick for last.
Most of my picks are still here that I mean,
We're gonna have some good honorable mentions.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff,
yeah.
you know.
Going to be longer than the
You want to do them
podcast.
now? The honorable mentions, and then we go to the final pick.
no, let's hear his first. Let's hear his pick first.
Let's hear. I have no
yeah,
idea what it's supposed to be, by the way.
Oh, who my pick?
Has everybody guessed?
No, I don't think it's like super obvious, but I think it's a perfect pick. So let me do my thing. It's going to bring us back to a song from 1990, which I think in some ways is cool. This is a band that started in 1979, and they combine progressive metal, funk, soul, and some great vocal arrangements. I've seen them in concert a few times, and they're always really great. Interestingly, this is some good trivia. The album that this song appears on actually tracked on Billboard's top contemporary Christian chart at number 31. There you go. Vic knows.
Yep.
And this was their most this is their most commercially successful album, nearly hit gold. And the album is Faith, Hope, Love. The band is King's X.
Oh,
and
the song
is We Were Born to Be Loved. May not be the one that you would have picked. But We Were Born to Be Loved. If you've seen them in concert, they will end with this song. Actually, on Progressive Nation at Sea, they ended with this song. And it is an all-time great riff. Ty Tabor's excellent guitar player. I love Jerry and Doug together, like one of the all-time great rhythm sections. I don't know how they keep up with all the changes. And so I remember listening to this song, again, before I really knew what prog or rock was or whatever. Actually, some people listened to this because it was Christian, or like supposedly Christian, you know, a lot of the original lyrics, the first couple albums.
I never thought of them as a Christian band at all. But
I could see why you would not
did.
think of them as, but somehow they were kind of in that stream. You know, they had C.S. Lewis lyrics, Space Trilogy lyrics on some of the first couple albums. And anyway, meeting Doug at a concert, I don't really know how they were classified as that, but anyway, he's a free spirit. And so, but the changes at the end of that song, it's just like, I still can't even count it or keep up with it. And when you see them play it live, they just nail it. And it's the coolest thing ever. Forever. It just keeps going. They go as long as they want. It's like, what are they doing? Great harmonies. And I guess it would be said that King's X has had a huge influence on hard rock, metal in general, but certainly I think on a certain aspect of prog rock and prog metal. And they're just such a cool band. And so we'll go back to 1990 with that pick. Great album cover too.
Nice closing.
And
very good.
In the book.
There you go.
In the book.
So that's a great pick, man. It is out of left field, but you're right. It shouldn't have been. And
Right.
Totally fits.
Even as you were describing them, I'm like, who's he talking about? Oh,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah.
And it's very 90s, which is cool. Nice. So third final round, we had Fate's Warning, Pleasant Shade of Grey, Queensryche, Silent Lucidity, Enchant at Death's Door, Symphony X, Divine Wings of Tragedy, Cynic, Veil of Maya, Cynic, see, in the book right there, and Faith, Hope, Love, We Were Born to Be Loved. King's X from Faith, Hope, Love. And nice. These are great picks. I think we may get some flack here. We left off some pretty major bands that had albums in the 90s.
Yep.
Genesis, We Can't Dance. I thought Geoff might go Fading Lights or something, but they're not their proggiest moment, that album, so that's okay. Rush, had Counterparts and Roll the Bones.
Yeah, I wanted to pick I like Animate.
I had Animate and Bravado were my two
pretty cool too.
Picks there.
Stick it out. That was mine.
And Pink Floyd, Division Bell.
Yeah.
Which we left off.
Yep.
And I had depending on how things went, I had sort of a left field pick with Queen, Innuendo. Song, which is one of my favorite songs from them, and a full-on prog track with Steve Howe playing Spanish guitar on it. So interesting, we left some of those off, but I think we covered a lot of great ones. What are some other honorable mentions you guys have?
I mean, the biggest thing is, and we talked about this in the run-up, is how many Dream Theater songs we could pick. And we
had to put with one.
But I felt it was appropriate if we were only going to have one, it should be a change of seasons. But if you could have two, for me, it would probably be Metropolis Part 1, because that is effectively what sprouts into Metropolis Part 2. But Dance of Eternity, you could argue from, just instrumental prog epic is the pick. So, and Daniel would pick Home. So
yeah.
Yeah, for me, Rush, Counterparts, and Pink Floyd, both of those, I figured one of you guys was going to pick one of them. Kansas came back in 95 with Freaks of Nature. I don't know if you guys like that record, but I thought that was awesome. It was a total return to form. They had a violinist come back in when David Ragsdale. You got Kevin Gilbert came out in the 90s. Roger Waters, Amused to Death. Who else? Neil Morse's first solo record with Whole Nother Trip. A ton of other prog metal, Shadow Gallery, Stradivarius, Pain of Salvation we talked about, Symphony X we talked about, Crimson Glory.
Devin Townsend had Ocean Machine.
Ocean Machine. And Infinity.
So I thought something from one of those, although we don't tend to bring his name up when we do a lot of these podcasts. So I'm not surprised he got left off, unfortunately. But most of the big ones that we all like, we covered. So yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, Vic went super metal on us with his picks, so that maybe took up some spots. But all right, that was cool.
My version takes off Vic's 3 tracks and replaces them by Genesis, Pink Floyd, and Endless Dream by Yes.
Exactly.
I'm perfectly happy with this because
absolutely,
if Fates Warning got picked, Queensryche got picked. And Dream Theater, that. But
in the 70s and 80s podcast, we had 2 songs by Yes, 2 songs by Pink Floyd in each podcast, 2 songs by Rush in each podcast. We went really heavy with some of those, so they got covered. And so,
good.
It's all good.
Yeah, you got to listen to the whole series of albums to really get the intended impact.
Make sure to listen to all the songs, especially my picks, because they are the best.
So technically with Liquid Tension Experiment, you could argue that there is enough of a second Dream Theater song in there, even though it's not really called Dream Theater.
I think that works. Yeah.
Yep.
Another Spock's Beard song, for goodness sakes. There's some great Spock stuff.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked at that, and I don't know if to say that I'm disappointed in this crew for not picking more Spock's Beard, or really proud of
the guy who picked Cynic. Stink fist.
I mean, you had your chance.
You're disappointed in us.
I know. I said in this group, we're all included.
You're part of it. Yeah.
Hey, don't look at us. Don't look at us.
I have a quick question because I wrote this album down and it is not prog. It may be prog adjacent. Does anybody know Galactic Cowboys Space in Your Face album?
Love it.
Wow, that's a great one.
Great one. Yeah,
that could have fit. That would have been a bit out there, but that's a proggy record for sure.
Yep.
So you make me smile. I do what I do. No problems. Their vocal arrangements, and not prog. It wasn't considered prog. That's just a good rock record.
No, they were. You know what they were? They were more like a metal band that threw in Beach Boys harmonies.
Yeah, that's a great description.
But enough for Portnoy to take them out on tour with Dream Theater. They opened up for Dream Theater.
Their first 2 albums are really good. Good band. Yeah, for sure. All right, this was cool. Thanks, guys. Always fun to chat and hang out. Anybody else?
Good time.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I guess it wasn't then. Screw you guys.
Fun to hang out.
What else did we miss? I guess is the big question. But I think that about covers.
Read out your list, Kyle. Go on. You want to?
No, this was like the shortest list I'd ever come up with because I felt like my picks wouldn't get picked.
But it still needed a staple.
No, there's no staple. Well, 2 sheets. Okay, I could have gone double-sided. I think what you start to see is when you did the 70s, essential album, you sort of had an idea of what was going to get picked. By the 80s, and maybe a little bit less likely, but all still tethered to the 70s in many ways. And now it's all wide open with the 90s. And so you're going to have someone like Vic pick what he picked, and to someone like Geoff, who was a huge prog fan throughout that, is like, who? So I think that is really the developing story of progressive rock and of music in general, is just the stream is broadening. And so it makes these lists really interesting.
What's going to be interesting is the 2000s pick album where it's all Neil Morse and Mike Portnoy.
Well, I welcome it.
Tune in.
I don't know how we're going to do that one, man.
A year from now, we will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was totally by accident, by the way. I happened to look, and it was exactly a year ago. It might be by the time we post this. It's like almost to the week. So.
By accident. There's another good pick.
That's a good one.
There you go. On that note, cool. All right, guys. We'll see y'all later. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, fellas.
Thank you, Roie.
Bye.
Stink fist.